Welcome to TKX Stories. Today, we take you into a world of fear and mystery with a tale from the legendary H.P. Lovecraft. In The Dreams in the Witch House, a student named Walter Gilman faces terrifying nightmares in a house filled with dark, ancient secrets. As the lines between reality and horror blur, he uncovers a chilling truth that could cost him everything. Stay with us and let the darkness unfold. It all began when Walter Gilman arrived at the witch house. The air was thick with an eerie stillness. The house stood at the end of a crooked street in the decaying town of Arkham, casting a long, jagged shadow over the neighborhood. Its sinister silhouette, with steep, gabled roofs and windows that seemed to slant at impossible angles, loomed like a predatory figure. No birds sang nearby, and the wind, carrying the scent of damp rot, whispered through the cracked bricks of the ancient structure. Gilman, a diligent student of folklore and mathematics, had come to Arkham to study at the local university. But his deeper reason for moving into the witch house was far more peculiar. He had heard the legends, the dark history surrounding the house, the stories of people who had gone mad, or worse, vanished without a trace. The tales were irresistible to someone with his intellectual curiosity. The building itself was an enigma, with its strange architecture and the unsettling aura that surrounded it. As he stepped inside, the interior of the house greeted him with a musty smell. The floor creaked underfoot, and the walls seemed to lean inward, closing in on him. Mrs. Dombrowski, the landlady, handed him the key to his room with trembling hands. Her voice dropped to a hushed tone as she muttered a warning. "People say strange things happen in that room at night. Beware of the dreams, Mr. Gilman. Beware." But Gilman, rational and skeptical, dismissed her words. He believed there were logical explanations for everything. Little did he know that his arrival marked the beginning of a terrifying descent into madness. The first night in the witch house passed without much incident, but as Gilman fell into a deep sleep, something stirred in the shadows. His dreams were vivid, too vivid. At first, they were mere fragments, distant shapes, strange faces in the dark, and unsettling feelings of being watched. But these fragments soon coalesced into something more sinister. In his dream, he found himself standing in a vast, otherworldly landscape where the very fabric of reality seemed to shift and twist. The sky above was a sickly green, swirling with unnatural clouds that moved like ink in water. The ground beneath his feet wasn't solid, but rather an ever-changing pattern of angles and lines that made no sense to the human mind. It was as though he had stepped into a world governed by alien laws of physics. As he tried to comprehend the impossibilities surrounding him, a figure began to emerge from the distance, a shadowy form, draped in tattered robes, moving slowly toward him. Its face was hidden beneath a hood, but there was no mistaking the malevolent presence that radiated from it. And by its side, scurrying and chittering, was something far worse, a small, hunched creature that looked part rat, part human, with beady red eyes that gleamed with cruel intelligence. This was Brown Jenkin, and beside him, Keziah Mason, the witch who had once lived in the house. As the dream ended with a cold, claw-like grip on his shoulder, Gilman awoke in terror. Sweat drenched his body, and his heart raced. The room was silent, yet the oppressive weight of the nightmare lingered. The darkness felt thicker somehow, as if it harbored secrets he couldn't see. The next morning, despite his exhaustion, Gilman threw himself into his studies. He was determined to find an explanation for the disturbing dreams. At the university's library, he scoured ancient texts and historical records, searching for any connection between his strange visions and the history of the witch house. His research soon led him to the infamous Keziah Mason, a woman condemned for witchcraft during the Salem trials. Keziah Mason had been no ordinary witch, according to legend. She had delved into the occult sciences, studying forbidden knowledge about the hidden dimensions and the strange geometries that defied natural law. It was said that she had drawn peculiar symbols on the walls of her prison cell before her mysterious disappearance. Some believed that Keziah had discovered how to traverse the spaces between worlds, slipping through the cracks in reality to escape her captors. Gilman became obsessed with the idea that the house itself was connected to these forbidden secrets. The odd angles in the architecture, the unnatural dreams, everything pointed to the possibility that the witch house was more than just a building. It was a gateway. Each night, the dreams grew more intense, more vivid, until Gilman could no longer distinguish them from reality. He would awaken in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, only to find himself standing in the center of his room, unaware of how he got there. Once, he awoke with his hands covered in dust, standing near a trapdoor he hadn't noticed before in the ceiling above his bed. The dreams were no longer just dreams. They were experiences. He found himself running through endless corridors with walls that bent and twisted, hearing voices whispering from unseen corners. Keziah was always there, her black, hollow eyes watching him, drawing him nearer to her dark purpose. Brown Jenkin would skitter just out of sight, always lurking in the shadows, waiting for his moment to strike. His fellow lodger, Frank Elwood, began to notice the change in Gilman. "You're not yourself, Walter," Elwood said one morning, watching Gilman's pale, hollow-eyed face across the breakfast table. "You're drawn and thin. Whatever's going on, it's taking its toll on you. Maybe you should leave that house." But Gilman was beyond the point of leaving. He was trapped by the house, by Keziah, by the unspeakable truths he was on the verge of discovering. His mind was unraveling, and yet a part of him needed to know what lay at the end of the nightmares. Gilman's studies led him deeper into the occult, and what he uncovered shook him to his core. Keziah Mason had not merely been a witch. She had been something far worse. Her rituals, long lost to time, had involved the summoning of otherworldly entities, beings from dimensions beyond human comprehension. Her ultimate goal had been to open a gateway between worlds, to merge the waking world with the nightmare realm where she now resided. The strange symbols Gilman had been dreaming of, they were not just meaningless scribbles. They were keys to the dimensional doorways that existed in hidden places, like the angles of the witch house itself. These angles, so disjointed and wrong, were like seams in the fabric of reality, places where one could slip through into the unknown. And Keziah, with the help of Brown Jenkin, was using these symbols to lure Gilman to her side. She wanted him for something, a dark, twisted purpose. He could feel her drawing closer with every passing night, her presence lingering at the edge of his dreams. On the night of Walpurgisnacht, the atmosphere in the witch house was charged with an otherworldly energy. The air felt thick, buzzing with unseen forces, and the walls seemed to hum with anticipation. Gilman knew that tonight would be the climax, the moment Keziah had been waiting for. As he drifted into a fitful sleep, the nightmare began again. But this time, he was no longer a passive observer. He was standing before Keziah Mason, her ancient face twisted into a hideous grin, her eyes burning with malevolent intent. Around them, the walls of the dream warped and shifted, forming the impossible geometries that had haunted his sleep for so long. Brown Jenkin darted toward him, his sharp teeth bared, but this time Gilman was ready. With a desperate lunge, he grabbed the creature by the throat, squeezing until its writhing body went limp. But even as he fought, Keziah's voice echoed in his mind, a dark incantation that made his skin crawl. Suddenly, the air around him seemed to tear open, revealing a swirling vortex of darkness, a portal to another world. Keziah's hands reached for him, pulling him closer, and he realized with horror that there was no escape. She had succeeded. The gateway between worlds was opening. In a final, desperate attempt to break free, Gilman awoke in his bed, drenched in sweat, his heart pounding in his chest. But something was wrong. The room was colder than it should have been, and the shadows seemed to shift and move on their own. Suddenly, a sharp, searing pain shot through his body. He looked down to see Brown Jenkin, alive and snarling, burrowing into his chest with sharp, needle-like claws. He screamed in agony as the familiar's rat-like face leered at him, its eyes filled with unholy glee. Elwood burst into the room, but it was too late. Gilman's body was contorted in a grotesque pose, his face twisted in terror as blood pooled on the floor. Elwood could only stare in horror at the lifeless body of his friend, knowing that something far worse than death had claimed him. The next morning, the authorities found Gilman dead, his chest unnaturally torn open. They couldn't explain the cause of death. The witch house, once again, claimed its victim, and Gilman's terrifying story was added to the house's growing legend. Years later, when workmen finally dismantled the witch house, they found something hidden in the attic, a set of human bones, alongside the small skeletal remains of a creature with rat-like features. The truth of Walter Gilman's death and the dark forces that had haunted him would remain a mystery. Forever lost in the shadows of the witch house was eventually condemned, its doors sealed forever, but the darkness that had once inhabited it still lingered. Those who walked by claimed to hear faint scratching noises and whispers from within. The legend of Keziah Mason, Brown Jenkin, and the horrific fate of Walter Gilman would live on, casting a shadow over Arkham for generations to come. And so, the tragic tale of Walter Gilman and the horrors of the witch house comes to a close. In the end, Gilman's pursuit of knowledge led him down a dark path, into the depths of ancient terror, where reality and nightmare became one. The legend of Keziah Mason and Brown Jenkin will forever haunt the shadows of Arkham, a reminder of the dangers that lurk when we venture too far into the unknown. If this story gave you chills, be sure to like and share it with others who enjoy a good scare. We have many more haunting tales in store, so don't forget to subscribe to TKX Stories for more thrilling journeys into the realms of mystery, folklore, and dark fiction. Hit the notification bell so you never miss a new adventure. Thank you for joining us, and until next time, stay curious. But beware of what you might find in the shadows.